Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. Time to go. Let's hurry. Come on, hurry up. Let's go. Get on board. Contact me on Twitter before Elon Musk destroys it or something like that. I guess we're all still focused on that. Looks like, I think, maybe, they're going through with this thing. I don't know what it means for anybody. It's still no clearer than any other day. I got people asking me questions about what does Elon Musk mean about free speech, and the answer is no one knows, because free speech isn't something that really applies to a private entity like this. But I gather that it means, like most, I think the best guess is he'll just give a gimmitarian definition to free speech. Things that he wants to say or that he thinks are cool for other people to say will be allowed even if they bother other people, and things that he doesn't like will be against the rules because it's a private entity and they can have whatever rules that they want. And I don't know, there's some weird speculation going on about what the parameters will be, and will he draw the line this way or that way, and how difficult it will be to police that line. And it won't be difficult. He'll just decide what he likes and what he doesn't until he gets bored with the thing and it gets shelved, like his tunnel digging company, which only comes up every once in a while when he gets caught in traffic. And the boring, hard part of running Twitter will, I'm sure, drive him back to looking for something else fun to do. All right. Well, there's plenty going on today. I don't really have any time to spend on Elon Musk, but we can sum it up this way with Bill's morning tweet, letting you know that the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and that I, Kagro X, will start with an opening line, and I guess here we go. Knock, knock. No, I guess this doesn't work on the radio. That's right. Well, anyway, luckily it's scripted for me. Knock, knock. Who's there? Elon Musk. And then just, ha ha ha, Elon Musk is the joke. That's the whole thing. And in fact, you're not allowed to talk about anything else. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about how poor the delivery of a knock, knock joke would be on radio. Unless Greg calls, in which case, then we can do the thing. Okay. Well, we'll leave that for later then. What other things have we to round up today? Well, gosh, I don't know. Lots happening with Madison Cawthorn, everybody's favorite jerk-ass member of Congress, the kid from North Carolina who just never grew up, but then became a member of Congress. Caught again, this is the second time, caught trying to bring a handgun with him onto a plane at an airport. And it's starting to feel like it's a strategy for him. He's in trouble with everything else. I guess the thing he did where he said that all the congressmen were snorting cocaine, or what did he use? Doing key bumps, whatever, of cocaine and going to orgies, got everybody mad, and they can't wait to get rid of him. And so they're dumping everything they've got on him, and or framing him. I don't care. It doesn't make a difference to me. Not sure what's happening, but a couple of no good, very bad, terrible, awful, whatever. I can't remember how the title goes. Days for Madison Cawthorn. Like I said, caught bringing a gun. This is his second time. A couple of days ago, I put away an article and I never got around to it because it's getting like tedious to keep up with his troubles with the law, which is kind of a white privilege problem. But he also was recently stopped by the police, for one or another moving violations. And I think this is probably about his fourth or fifth traffic stop in the 1 year that he's been in Congress, plus the second time he's been caught bringing a gun to the airport. Plus, as it turns out, this is probably his fifth weapons offense in general in the last year. So he's not too clear on what the law is, or he's very clear on what the law is for members of Congress and, white guys. You just do whatever you want, and when you get caught, you go, gee whiz, and walk away from it. But as it happens, well, let's see. I don't know. You don't really need to know the whole story. He was in, I don't even know, Charlotte, I guess, airport, and on Tuesday cited for carrying a loaded gun, trying to get on a plane. It's the second time that I said that this has happened to him. And, they do all the courtesies. They'll give him the gun back when he comes back through town, et cetera, et cetera. No suspension of gun licenses, because there might not even be any gun licenses. Who knows? But TPM, Talking Points Memo, tweeting this morning and pointing out that it's guns and knives with this guy. On Tuesday, he was cited for carrying a loaded gun at the airport. Last February, TSA found another, he prefers the 9mm handguns, apparently. Both times a 9mm. Last February, with a gun in his carry-on. And then 3 separate sightings of him with knives on school property in 2021. Loves bringing his weapons everywhere. I guess it makes him look, feel, sound like a tough guy. And he might, like I said, in fact, be doing it on purpose. Perhaps to distract from the other problems that he's got. And I don't know how to put too much, I can't put too much credence in it because it's being reported, I think, exclusively by the Washington Examiner, which I, generally speaking, don't trust very much. But they also dump on him today. Where's the headline? Madison Cawthorn implicated in potential insider trading scheme, experts say. And I know at one point he fancied himself something of an investor. I think he, for a long time, claimed that his job prior to being elected to Congress was that he had some sort of investment fund or hedge fund that he ran, and there weren't any employees and he didn't have any assets invested and whatever else. But he imagines himself to be a tremendous financial success. So we'll see about that. Perhaps we'll read it later on. I'm sure that's not where Greg is going to spend his time. But some interesting speculation came along with that, and I think I put that tweet aside right next to it. Maybe not. I don't know. I thought so. Or is the Stephen Dennis one? No, that's a different one. Stephen Dennis was tweeting something else, which was another quick hit. Kamala Harris has COVID-19, along with a few other prominent Democrats, including Senators Ron Wyden and Chris Murphy. So everybody's getting the COVID all over again. She's getting the monoclonal treatments or the Provlaxid or whatever. I can't remember how you pronounce it anymore. But Greg knows. He's here. So lots of people getting COVID, lots of people walking around with guns. And the tweet I guess I didn't put aside was somebody was speculating that they were essentially the Republicans are kind of done with Madison Cawthorn in a way that they're not, for whatever reason, yet done with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that day may be coming. And everybody who knows anything about him that's negative is dumping it in the hopes that he'll just be driven from the race or primaried out or something like that. They've had enough of Madison Cawthorn, and haven't we all? He's a big problem.
The difference is that in North Carolina, there are people like Tom Tillis who has won re-election, isn't up for election this time, and can afford to do things like literally run ad campaigns against Madison Cawthorn. In other words, there can be a senior establishment Republican who bites the bit and says, okay, I'm going after this guy. In Georgia, the most prominent Republican, of course, is Brian Kemp, the governor, and he's running for re-election, and he's running against the Trumper, and he's not quite in the same position to take on somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene and take her out.
Yeah. So
it's a matter of practical politics. If Kemp weren't running, he probably would do exactly what Tom Tillis is doing.
Could be. Yeah, and I wonder, well, there's plenty to dump on her, and I guess her day will come if she survives and makes it onto the ballot even. I guess that's still an open question. We'll see what the judge does.
Yeah, I don't know how open a question is. All the judge could do is say, okay, there's enough here for me to refer it to the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who himself is running and has his own issues with Trumpers. And again, the problem is even Brit Hume had tweeted this morning.
Not Brit Hume.
Everybody knows that Republican politicians can't stand Trump and think he's a jerk, but they're all afraid of his voters. I mean, that's just a political fact. And as long as it's a situation where you're running for election, you're going to say nothing because you're afraid of the voters. You can't win without them. You know that. They know that.
That solves something.
And so you're basically being held hostage by them.
Maybe that explains their COVID policy. They're hoping to wipe out the Trump voters by convincing them not to get vaccinated or treat.
Yeah, eventually. Speaking of COVID policy,
while.
Tony Fauci says, I ain't going to that White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Well,
the old guy can go.
Yeah, okay.
The president, but I'm not going.
Yes. I wouldn't either, and I
wouldn't either. But Biden may say, for political purposes, I have to show America it's behind us, which would be really stupid. But then again, people have done stupid things.
Yeah, I wonder. Is that his plan? He has said he's going to go.
He hasn't said.
Okay, well, don't say yet, sir. Tears streaming down my eyes. Don't go. So,
don't go.
By the way, don't go even when there's no pandemic. It's just dumb. But,
right.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going. No matter whether they invite me or not.
Well, you're not invited. You don't have to worry. You don't like those things anyway. It's like going to a speech.
It's further from my house than the mailbox. And
therefore, I won't do it.
Right.
I totally am on board with that. So
getting in a
before
car.
we do more domestic stuff, I wanted to do some foreign affairs here.
Wow. Is there anything even happening?
Yeah, there is.
All right.
And I was scrambling to figure out how does this work so that when I get on the radio or internet or podcast or whatever we call this.
Got to work this out.
And I pretend to understand it so I can explain in a very serious voice. Those are capital letters. This is how it works. It's as if I'm an expert on it. And I promise you I'm not.
Oh.
All I know is what I know from Wikipedia and what I know from Daily Kost's commenter Mark Lipman, who lives in France and sends me the Le Monde pieces in English.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yes, that's all I know. So here's the deal. Okay, as you probably are aware,
yes,
Emmanuel Macron won the French election and Marine Le Pen lost.
I am aware of that.
What does it mean now? What happens next? And for the answer to that, I asked him and I asked Wikipedia and I read this Reuters piece and I thought I would share with you that one of the important things that happens now is we have legislative elections coming up in France.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
and typically, they're a month later. So this will be in June. It is possible that as president, Macron can dissolve the parliament and ask for faster elections like they do in England.
Faster
but
than
that would only move it up by 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right. So
why would you do that? Well, if I just won and I think I have the momentum, maybe I'll do that.
Okay.
That's
a thing.
So it's possible. So watch for that. That doesn't change the total dynamics of everything, but it's not a strategic thing. It's a tactical thing. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
That is to say, see if he does it. Meanwhile, what happens is that there's 577 seats up for vote.
Is that all of them?
Each person representing a constituency. And in the first round, because there's 2 rounds here, in the first round, you're trying to get 50% and 25% of the eligible voters. You got to have both things. And if you get both things, you win. A lot of people don't. And so there's a second round. And people who can run in the second round are those who got 12.5% of eligible votes in the first round. So you may be running against 1 person, 2 persons, 3 persons. There's always going to be, if you didn't get your 50% plus 25%, if you didn't get that, you're going to be running against at least 1 person. And then whoever wins the plurality in the second round is the elected person for that constituency.
Okay. All right. Well.
Right. So why is that important? Because traditionally what happens in France is that whichever party gets the majority in these elections offers up their choice for prime minister.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Macron is president. And what happens if you have the president from one party and the prime minister from a different party? And so that's the way things are shaping up. It would be the situation where the president is still in charge of foreign policy, but the prime minister runs the government. So it would severely curtail the power of the president, although the president still might set direction. In this particular case, it is highly unlikely that the right would win a majority.
All right.
In fact, what happened, and here's the issue with what's going on with Le Pen's party, She represents her. It's like Perot's party.
Yeah.
It's her.
Oh.
I mean, it's not like there's a deep bench of a whole bunch of other people running. It's Joe Lieberman's Connecticut party. All right. And so it's only her. And the last time she tried to do this, I think her party only got 8 seats, and you need 15 to be recognized as an official party. Way far away from anything close to being a majority that therefore gets to pick the prime minister. But the person who came in third that we've talked about as we've covered these elections.
There he is. Mélenchon.
Mélenchon. Okay.
Something
he
like that. Yes.
immediately after losing said, I'm running for prime minister. And I didn't quite understand what that meant. But what that means is he wants his party to get the majority in these upcoming legislative elections. Therefore, his party would pick him as prime minister. It's not up to Macron. And so that's where he's angling at. And he's got a way better chance of doing that than Le Pen's party. As a matter of fact, this Le Monde article starts out, quarreling French far right struggles to unite for legislative elections. Marine Le Pen has already set her sights on the June 12th and 19th elections. Remember, it could move up. Hoping to induct a significant far-right group into the Assemblée Nationale. And Eric Zemmour, who is the other far-right person who's even to the right of Le Pen, called for an alliance while criticizing her defeat, which is great. So it reads, it all started very badly. Ms. Le Pen was reeling from her defeat on Sunday night. Remember how everybody was writing about how, she won even though she lost? And I was saying that's ridiculous. The guy who won is the guy who won. Ms. Le Pen was reeling from her defeat on Sunday night, and it was a defeat, when Mr. Zemmour called on her to, quote, forget about quarrels and unite forces with him while roundly condemning her. This is the 8th time that defeat strikes the name of Le Pen.
Okay. Well, that's
it was,
true.
And from her perspective, it was a very tactful marriage proposal, sarcastically replied Jordan Bardella, the interim president of Le Pen's party. There is certainly an uphill battle towards a union, but the ex-pundit's attack has only caused further great annoyance at Rassemblement National, that's her party, RN headquarters. So the National Front, that's in England. This is RN, the French version.
Right.
And they don't get along. And so whether or not this, that would be why Macron would tactically move up the election. Oh, you guys are fighting? Let's have the election now.
Yeah, I was wondering how Mélenchon would he feel about that. He might be ready for that.
Well, he doesn't care.
Oh. Well,
I mean, anything that hurts her, he figures, okay, if they're not going to vote for her, they're going to vote for me. I mean,
probably
1/3 of my voters voted for her.
Okay.
He thinks.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so, part of the reason why she did so well, that was the anti-Paris vote.
Right. Okay.
2/3 of his voters who bothered to vote at all voted for Macron, but 1/3 voted for the Nazi. And so that being the case, he thinks he can get those voters back, and there's enough there, and hopefully he wants to be prime minister. So, there's going to be a lot of that kind of maneuvering going on, and that's basically what's going on. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Well, fine.
But, I just wanted to alert our listeners to what's going on there. And, experts can certainly weigh in. I am not one. This is from Reuters. After parliamentary elections, French presidents traditionally name a new prime minister from the party with the most votes to form a new government. In recent legislative ballots, the president's party's won. But should the outcome be different this time, Macron would have little choice but to name a prime minister from another party, ushering in what's traditionally been a tense period of cohabitation during which presidential powers are severely curbed. During a cohabitation, the president remains head of the armed forces and retains foreign policy influence, but the government has responsibility for most other day-to-day matters of state and policy, the prime minister being the government.
Okay.
So that'll be an interesting thing.
I guess so. Well, we'll see how it plays out. That's certainly a little bizarre. And, I guess so. Is it technically you kind of win the prime ministership by having the majority, but then you get formally named prime minister by the president?
Yeah, exactly.
Does he have any choice? Can he just
go,
no,
he
I'm
have
not
a choice?
doing it?
I don't know. It'd be interesting
really,
to
no,
see
probably,
what he does there. I don't know. You have to go against tradition. I don't know what the law is. That's where true experts need to come in. And, of course, if Macron's party wins, then it's not even an issue.
All right. Yes. I guess that's true. Okay.
Yeah. But, Yeah, these are great process questions that I don't know the answer to.
Yes, plus it's in French.
Because everything I know, I just learned 25 minutes ago.
That's enough. If you've got it by airtime, you're an expert.
That's all I'm doing here.
And if you're wrong, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, we are not of the right, so we can't do that.
Again tomorrow and say different.
So, of course, the other big story that's going on is in Ukraine. And there's an interesting piece in a place called War on the Rocks, which is national security for insiders by insiders. And I'm not one. I just read it.
All right.
But this is by Andrew Goodman. It's called Putin the Planner, and had some interesting thoughts about how we got here. And it talks about Putin's career basically of being a thug.
All right.
And then as he moved to the presidency, he just continued his thuggishness, which he has a history of going back to, I guess, when he was a mayor. He really likes to stomp on his opposition and screw them. That's just his M.O.
Okay.
So here he is. They were hoping to have improved relations with Ukraine, meaning they have one of his people in charge.
I see. Yeah.
Who would bow down to Mother Russia. And the possibility of improved relations disappeared when Zelensky changed the approach to dealing with separatists and took a number of steps that antagonized Putin. First, in December 2019, negotiations between Putin and Zelensky went nowhere when Zelensky said he wanted to amend the Minsk agreement.
Okay.
Zelensky then made a renewed push for an association agreement with the European Union and membership in NATO. I think he was talking about the degree of autonomy that the breakaway republics, in Donetsk and
Luhansk, maybe
Luhansk in the Donbass. Zelensky then made a renewed push for an association agreement with the European Union and membership in NATO. He also aroused Putin's ire by shutting down pro-Russian television stations and pressing treason charges against a close friend of Putin's for funding the separatists. So they weren't getting along.
No.
Right? That marriage proposal didn't go that far. Complicating matters, and this is the important part for American politics, complicating matters was the strained personal relationship between Putin and Zelensky. Before Zelensky became Ukraine's president, he had starred in a hit TV series that poked fun of Putin, something Putin had not tolerated since the St. Petersburg days when he was mayor, and he used to screw the opposition. Upon Zelensky's election, Putin offered Russian passports to the Donbass population, to which Zelensky gave a mocking response, and that set the tone for further exchanges, which probably made Zelensky into a personal target of Putin's invasion, which is one of the reasons why right now Russia's making noises about invading Zelensky's hometown, even though it has absolutely no strategic importance.
That's very Trumpy.
Still, there was no reason, Goodman writes, for Putin to act so long as Donald Trump was president. Putin saw Trump weakening NATO by bashing it verbally, questioning whether the U.S. should honor Article 5, which is, attack one of us, attack all of us, and reportedly flirting with the idea of withdrawing completely. If NATO might self-destruct, there was no need for Putin to act to prevent Ukraine from joining it. So when Trump says, by the way, that under me, things would have been different. Well, yeah, you wouldn't have needed to because you were going to do it.
Right. Under Quisling, it was not necessary to,
Yeah, Putin had to change his calculus after Trump's defeat in 2020. Joe Biden took steps to reassure allies of the U.S. commitment to NATO, although there was nothing in NATO's official statement to suggest that Ukraine could or would obtain membership at a definite point in time. The change in the U.S. attitude towards the alliance, combined with Zelensky's support for membership, meant the Ukraine problem became more acute. In other words, Putin could neither rely on Zelensky nor Biden to do his bidding. So it ticked them off. The timing might appear to be coincidental, but just a few months after Biden took office, the Russian military buildup began on Ukraine's borders. This development fits with Putin's penchant for planning carefully before taking action. It suggests Putin may already have made the decision to invade. Now, that's important, too, because if, in fact, that's true, all of the nonsense that you hear from American pundits about, if you only had asked Ukraine not to join NATO, it's our fault that Putin invaded because we really riled him up. It was also basic and underlying that nothing, for example, that Biden said was the reason Putin invaded. Nothing that Biden specifically did. It was Biden's very existence and Trump's non-existence. That was really the basis for this invasion, and that's important.
Who are these Blame America firsters?
Well, we have we covered a couple of these on the show. We have these historians who said, NATO is the reason why Putin had to do it. And, of course, you have Rand Paul.
Yes.
Rand Paul in Congress saying, well, of course Russia had to invade because these places are really part of Russia.
Sure they were.
He was talking to Tony Blinken, and Blinken had to correct him. As Tom Nichols said, hi, Senator Rand Paul, Ukraine and other countries around Russia were not part of Russia. They were part of the Soviet Union. If you need any other expert advice to clear up the tons of things you don't understand about the biggest war in Europe since 1945, I'm happy to help.
Well, he's probably not really happy. But
well, Rand Paul said, literally, you could also argue the countries they've attacked were part of Russia.
Yep. It's going to be known as his Iron Curtain speech, except this time it's a pro-Iron Curtain speech. So,
pretty much.
Churchill
pretty
got
amazing.
famous this way.
The other thing I'll mention in terms of domestic parts of Ukraine, and we'll get to some domestic stuff after the break, is a very nice piece I have, and I just read the headline because that's all you need to know, but it's from the Bulwark, which essentially says, Biden's handling of Ukraine is the most successful American intervention since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and voters refuse to give him credit for it.
Oh, well,
he's done everything right.
Yeah, I mean,
he didn't send fighters to Ukraine, which they didn't need. He didn't impose a no-fly zone. He didn't. He was criticized for not sending enough offensive weaponry. His timing has been impeccable in all of this, and he's not getting credit for it.
All right. Well, take your praise where you can get it, I suppose. That's a pretty grandiose claim. Nice. Good. Wear it as a badge of honor. It's meant to be. So you don't even have to do this ironically. All right. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. How come we didn't solve Ukraine in the 2 minutes we were off
More to
here?
the point,
We'll
why
find
didn't
out.
Biden solve it?
Exactly.
I mean, one of the points that people make about the polling is that, what do you think of Biden's performance in Ukraine? Well, I hate it. Ukraine hasn't won yet. I don't like that outcome. I'm writing. I don't like it. I don't like what he's doing. Well, do you like specifically what you say? Oh, I like that. Well, what about that other thing? I like that. How about the fact he didn't do that and it didn't backfire? Well, I like that too. Well, what about his overall performance? I hate it.
Yeah, terrible. Still a war. All right. Well, that's we're an impatient people, and also sometimes polling is dumb.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes the questions don't really get at it. Speaking of dumb polling, let's just mix this up a little bit as we throw in domestic and foreign together. This is Sam Stein tweeting, Morning Consult Politico poll.
Sounds dumb.
If a candidate is accused of fill in the blank, is it a major problem? And two things I'll point out about the question.
They're going to be...
Are they accused?
Yeah.
Not convicted? Not proven? Are they accused of something? And is it a problem?
All right, and then they give us choices for the thing in the blank?
Yeah, and we'll talk about a bunch of different things we'll fill in the blank with. But
okay.
We're asking, is it a major problem? Not will it change your vote. We're not asking whether they should resign. Just is it a problem? I happen to think it's a problem that Hunter Biden's name keeps coming up.
All right.
That doesn't mean that I think the Hunter Biden issue is significant, but I think it's a problem that it keeps coming up.
Okay.
I think it's a problem that Fox News covers it 24/7.
All right. I can see what
you
mean.
It depends on how you answer the question. But if a candidate is accused of sexual misconduct, is that a major problem?
Well, yes.
Well, 83% of Democrats say yes, 77% of independents, and 66% of Republicans.
That's because 33% of them are in favor of sexual misconduct.
You'd think. Domestic violence. If a candidate is accused of domestic violence, is it a major problem? 81% of Democrats say yes, 74% of independents, 67% of Republicans. In each one of these categories, the Republicans are going to be lagging behind the rest of the country, and sometimes drastically. For example, racist remarks. If a candidate is accused of racist remarks, is it a major problem? 80% of Democrats, 59% of independents, 38% of Republicans.
I mean, what's interesting here is what's really being asked is, in a very clever and disguised way, and I don't think this was their aim, but what you're really doing is asking, which party do you think is more likely to make racist comments, commit domestic violence, and sexual misconduct?
And explain it away.
Yeah, and
just blow it off. Which party is more likely to blow it off?
Yeah, that's true. And basically they're saying, well, those sound like Republican problems, so I'm a Republican, so nope, not a major problem because I'm going to vote for that guy anyway. Whereas the other
side... If
a
candidate is accused of homophobic remarks, is it a major problem? 71% of Democrats, 50% of independents, 25% of Republicans.
That's okay.
That's the lowest of all the different categories that Republicans get.
All right.
Right. And, don't forget right now, grooming and all the pedophile stuff is like a major Republican party platform. Since they don't have any others.
Right. And because they're doing it.
If a candidate is accused of anti-Semitism, is it a major problem? 71% of Democrats say yes, 61% of independents say yes, and 47% of Republicans. Higher. Anti-Semitism, according to Republicans, is a bigger issue than racist remarks or homophobic remarks.
Yes, they are, of course,
pledged
to the destruction of Israel through too much love. So,
but in none of those is it a majority, whereas domestic violence and sexual misconduct, at least a majority of Republicans say it's an issue.
Well, that is interesting.
So, polling is polling, but,
they take from it,
tells you stuff. Sometimes not what they intended when they first did the poll, but there it is.
Right. And you'd be surprised what they take from it, which is probably Republicans will say, if you want to sow chaos and destroy a Democrat with Democrats, we should accuse them of sexual misconduct, domestic violence, anti-Semitism, racism, and homophobia.
Right. So,
even though
speaking of all of those things, you know how sometimes you get annoyed when one poll question leads to another poll question, and you say, well, the first question influenced the second question, are you in favor of or opposed to molesting children?
Yes, I am.
What do you think of Tucker Carlson?
Now that's interesting.
I mean, you could. It's an old Yes Minister bit that's really very funny in terms of how you can change the results of the poll depending upon what leading questions you asked up until, the actual question you're looking for an answer to. So you just commission a poll to, get the answer that you want.
Let's do that.
So we've been talking about this in terms of domestic violence and sexual abuse and homophobia. Now let's talk about Viktor Orban.
Oh, all right.
Is Hungary's Viktor Orban the U.S. Christian rights knew Vladimir Putin? This is by Chrissy Stoop, and she writes a really interesting piece here, basically saying that because of Ukraine, if this is too long and you didn't read it, because of Ukraine, Putin's star is falling, and people are losing interest in him being the fighter for traditional religious rights, including hating on gays. But if you lose him, don't worry. Viktor Orban is there. Don't worry, if you lose Donald Trump, there's always Ron DeSantis. I'm not saying either one of them has anything to do with, those issues. Just a juxtaposition of leading questions here. Is Hungary's Viktor Orban, the U.S. Christian Right's new Vladimir Putin? The fall of Putin's star among U.S. evangelicals leaves a void they may seek to fill with another strongman leader devoted to, quote, family values. Very interesting concept.
But in Hungarian.
Yep.
That dreadful Hungarian?
Yes.
In the summer of 2013, after my first of 3 academic years teaching at the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration in Moscow.
Wow, that's
in Moscow. That's he's got creds, Chrissy. She is a Russian expert, and I've often turned to her to advice about what was going on in prior years. So I know her for a long time. I was back in the American state of Indiana, the Republican stronghold in which I was born and raised, and whence the very evangelical former Vice President Mike Pence also hails. And that same summer, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed his country's Don't Say Gay law, which banned the dissemination of propaganda of non-traditional sexual relations to minors, known in non-Orwellian language as life-saving information that LGBTQ children need to thrive. I was at an outdoor concert in a suburb of Indianapolis with some of my evangelical relatives, and he was raised evangelical, when this topic came up in conversation, and I distinctly remember how dismayed I was when one of them opined on how refreshing it was to see a political leader finally standing up to the gay agenda. And that was the moment it dawned on me that Putin's star was on the rise with the American Christian right, a phenomenon I began to observe systematically and which I eventually published commentary and policy research. Around the time of the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics, Franklin Graham, the son of the world-famous Billy Graham and current head of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, began to publicly express support for Putin thanks to his crackdown on LGBTQ community. In 2015, Graham met both Putin and Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, who declared anti-LGBTQ Christians like Graham to be confessors of the faith.
Interesting.
While the tendency to look at Putin as an exemplary Christian leader for his willingness to enforce traditional values through the state was never universal among American evangelicals, it proved quite persistent among the elites. Neither Russia's 2013 ban on the adoption of Russian children by Americans, nor its annexation of Crimea, nor its passage of the Yarovaya laws, which put severe restrictions on the kinds of proselytizing activities carried out by American missionaries in Russia, ultimately did much to stem the trend. However, it turns out the brutal war against Ukraine is proving a bridge too far, including for Graham. After the initial misstep of tweeting "Pray for President Putin" a few days after the invasion, which resulted in widespread criticism, Graham scrambled to clarify he didn't support the war. Nonetheless, he maintained there are a few things Putin has done that are right. And as somebody who grew up evangelical and still observes evangelical communities closely, I'm unsurprised by these developments, he writes, and talks about evangelical missionary organizations like Graham Samaritan's Purse. You probably heard about that because they've set up COVID stations, have a substantial presence in Ukraine where they can still proselytize freely, forced to choose between Ukrainian mission field and a country that is, among other atrocities, bombing Ukrainian civilians. Most American evangelicals will choose Ukraine. And this leaves open the question of whether the fall of Putin's star among evangelical Americans leaves a void they'll seek to fill by lionizing another foreign strongman, and that's where Orban comes in. He's already the darling of certain far-right Americans, such as the arch-reactionary writer Rod Dreher, a convert to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who's a cradle Episcopalian. And his brand will likely receive a major boost when the Conservative Political Action Conference meets in Budapest next month.
Right.
CPAC is going to Budapest.
Yes, I had heard that. I couldn't remember whether it had already happened or not, but okay, something to look forward to.
In some ways, Orban is a more natural political role model than Putin. Orban's a Calvinist. His right-wing party won another huge majority in the Hungarian parliament earlier this month, and Orban himself won a fourth term. That was thanks in large part to a backing of Hungarian evangelicals who, on the whole, find his anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ platform appealing.
Hungarian evangelicals.
Yeah.
All right.
And while Orban is surely Putin's closest ally among heads of state within the EU and NATO,
Yes.
Those American evangelicals who have commented on him recently seem prepared to give him a pass for this. And he cites, for example, Pat Robertson and other elites. So it's important to keep an eye on these developments for those of us concerned about international coalitions working to oppose women's and LGBTQ rights, whether or not our ban comes to loom as large among Americans' elite evangelicals as Putin once did. The other side of the coin, though, of course, we talked about this on the show, with Slovenia and with France voting against their populists, the whole star is falling thing needs to be kept in mind. Maybe we've reached a high watermark, to mix metaphors.
Okay, maybe. I have a hard time believing that but who knows what evangelicals are doing. But the idea of swapping...
I don't. That's why I read Chrissy.
Orban for Putin.
So she can tell us what evangelicals are doing.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't know. And
we follow a bunch of other people, Paul Jupp and Samuel Perry and other people who are, as sociologists and political scientists, following this stuff. Even Robert Jones and PRRI and other polls who look at this stuff. So we have some, database for our opinions about what they're doing, because we don't know, because we don't go to those churches.
Right. They never let us in.
We just don't go.
Right. Oh, I was going to blame it on them. But yeah, that too. Also further away than the mailbox, and wouldn't want to go. But yeah,
anyway, as we do our wide-ranging topic review, back to Ukraine here. This is David Patrikarkos, who is a newly arrived reporter in Ukraine. Dnipro to begin covering the battle for eastern Ukraine. Wow. And he's interviewing a fellow named Dima. Dima's been fighting since early March on the Ukrainian side. He has some great pithy quotes here. He has permission to tweet his photo and all of his comments. It's like World War II, but with modern technology. 2014 was a playground compared to this. And this is a guy who fought in both. Our greatest ally in this war is Russia corruption and the nature of the army. The soldier in the field briefs his officer. It's not good, but we're holding. So the next guy up reports to his superior, we're holding.
Yeah.
And the next guy, it's going well. And this is why Putin doesn't know how bad things are. It's a game of telephone.
Telephone.
Here's another quote. I didn't believe the war would happen because an invasion needs at least 3-to-1 numerical superiority. I looked on the borders of the army there, and it wasn't there, and they're crazy. Sometimes you play poker with a bad hand, but Russia's playing it without any cards.
Oh. Well.
And what has shocked me, he says, is the callousness of Russia's soldiers to their own men. And he then shows me a photo taken from a drone of soldiers eating lunch in a ruined house near several bodies lying in the dirt. They're eating 20 meters from the decomposing bodies of their own comrades. They just drop the bodies of their friends in trenches. Sometimes they don't even bother to cover them.
Nah.
So, morale, leadership, all that stuff matters when you're fighting a war, or so say the experts.
I wonder if that's... Yeah, I'm curious whether it's a lack of training or whether it's the kind of thing that Putin would say, give the orders that that's what you should do. It's going to spook the other side. They'll think you're
I don't think he's in a position to give those orders at that kind of granular level. I think that's just the ethos of the army there.
Could be.
They're raised brutal, they're treated brutal, they're trained brutally, and they act brutally.
Yeah. No, I mean, it could be, you could view it or explain it after the fact if you're looking to do something like that. Well, we do this on purpose to show, we're unstoppable and we don't care. And we're just not human. We're robotic killers. And it's supposed to work to your advantage. On the other hand, at home in Ukraine, you can say this is all the more reason we can't let them win. What a disaster it would be to be occupied by these maniacs.
This is Shashank Joshi, who's defense editor at The Economist, and who writes, a Western official told me, even when Russians take a village or town, the Ukrainians frequently counterattack immediately. Mm-hmm. That's why when you read, the Russians made modest advances, but really the situation hasn't changed. That's basically the report every day from the Eastern Front. So Russians have no time to bed down or control the situation. They're immediately on the back foot again. Ukrainian special forces are operating behind Russian lines and exploiting the vulnerability along supply chains. All of this buys time to allow the Ukrainians to continue to build up their capabilities.
All right.
We also see in practice is they're not advancing in heavy rain. It's also surprising because they have the ability to operate off the roads and they have had this ability since the beginning of the conflict, but they choose not to. They stay on the roads. Then we pick them up.
Yeah.
We don't get it, but hey, it's okay with us.
They may not have the ability, but okay.
Right. And go back to our friend Orban and our friend Chrissy Stroop talking about that. Talking about that. Kremlin propaganda, writes Michael Weiss. This is based on Russian state TV saying it's discovered a, quote, organization of gays and lesbians, end quote, in a building in Mariupol where Ukrainian nationalist battalions have been based. It was funded by USAID, said Russian TV, and virtually under the patronage of the U.S. president and Congress.
Yeah, they're big on that.
Right? So Michael Weiss points out, Kremlin propaganda. The West is depraved and in terminal decline. Look at all the gays. Also, Kremlin propaganda, but we can't go into Mariupol because of all the gays fighting there.
I guess so. Very vicious.
Right.
There's been some significant weird failures of Russian intelligence operations of late, including coming up with terrible stories. But yeah, there's a few others too.
Lawrence Friedman had pointed out, talking about this particular Russian TV, but also the Chrissy Stroop narrative that I gave you, you have to understand how deeply embedded in current Russian propaganda homophobia is. It's part and parcel of what they're doing. So, it's an important thing to relay to American audiences.
Right. So what I had seen about that was that in order to demonstrate that they had uncovered this, apparently it became clear that the Russian intelligence services, I guess military intelligence, needed to frame up these gays and lesbians who were somehow mysteriously meeting in Mariupol.
They must be Nazis too.
Yes, right. So they apparently said, "Look what we found in their possession. Why there are some as yet unopened, still wrapped in plastic Nazi flags, some various Nazi type pins and other things, plus some rainbow flags and things like that." And apparently,
I saw a very funny example of that. I'm thinking of. Because they were showing Nazi memorabilia apparently collected from Mariupol.
Yeah.
With a note that was written in Russian.
Yeah.
Did you see that one?
I saw the note and then the other thing. Yeah, go ahead with the note.
And somebody went ahead and translated it. And the note was talking about various and sundry things. And then there was one line in there that said, when you translate it to English, the signature could not be read.
Right.
It was illegible. It was right in the middle of this little discourse. And the interpretation of that was, the intelligence service was told to plant this and then put in an illegible signature.
So you couldn't quite.
And they literally put in, this signature cannot be read, it's illegible.
Right.
Rather than put in the signature.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically.
I did what you told me. You told me to write an illegible signature. So here it is, an illegible signature. Right here, I wrote it. Just like you told me.
I'm a genius. Look at camera. All right. Yeah, that was a good one.
That's supposed to publish the stage directions.
There was another one I understand, or I think it wasn't part of the same operation, that they said, all right, here's what you got to pack up to plant in this place so that you can prove that they're Nazi gays. And one, a Nazi flag, two, a gay flag. And then they said also, to show that they're a sophisticated operation and that they are communicating with one another, put 3 SIM cards from their phones in there. Right. Yes. And then apparently they misread that and they went out and bought the Sims 3.
Sims 3, SimCity, and they just scattered that around and said, look, there's Sims in here.
These are obviously gay Nazis. Who else would be playing Sims 3 at this point? What version are they on to later on? They're not only Nazis and gay, but behind the times. Anyway, that's the Republicans here can use that to call into question. Could the Russians really have been manipulating American public opinion and elections so effectively if this is the level at which they work? And that's a good question.
Well, what I want to know is why Marjorie Taylor Greene is accusing Democrats of playing SimCity. I don't understand it.
Right. Maybe that's it.
Why is Tucker Carlson saying that these games are part of the gay agenda? I don't get it.
Right. I'm Tucker Carlson, and my signature is unclear. That's all right, if you say so.
Oh, other things that we talked about on the show that are apparently showing up in the news, and that's Moldova and Transnistria.
Hey, yes, right. Lots of Moldova.
We talked about how you have to keep an eye on that, and it turns out that Russia's trying to do false flag bombings and blowing up stuff in the Transnistria area to try to get them involved in the war for unclear reasons, because they have a presence there. It's a breakaway republic, but that particular Russian force that's there is very poorly armed, fairly small, and unclear in terms of whether it really has any role. The big scary part is, what if they come out of Transnistria? They are to the left, to the west of Ukraine on the map. Yeah, and what if they just come out and there's another front there with the Transnistrians? Well, they're tiny.
Right, and they're Transnistrians. They can't possibly ally themselves with them.
Yeah, something like that. So, it's in the news. Keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Moldova doesn't have an army.
Oh, okay. They don't appear to have any border.
It's not clear how all of that plays out there. And again, the point isn't to laugh at Russia, haha, look what they're doing, because when Russia does stuff, usually it's like, I made this huge mistake, it was really stupid. I think I'll just bomb a whole bunch of people and kill civilians. Right. And so, it's never good. It's never funny, haha, in that regard. It's just like, scratch your head, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's still difficult to understand what they're doing there. And I just figured it was to cause trouble on two fronts, instability, a two-front war.
How much trouble? How much instability?
Yeah.
What are they
talking
just not
about?
Able
to do
what
enough.
Are they doing?
I don't know, but if they're putting Sim City over there, it's serious. I guess
here's another piece, again, to the
on
Ukraine puzzle. With the caveat, and Michael Kaufman adds this as well, don't try to interpret this too much because we really don't know what's going on. But with that caveat, Rob Lee writes, interesting nuggets in a recent NBC News article, a lot of real-time intelligence shared in terms of things that could be used for specific targeting of Russian forces, said a former senior intelligence official familiar with the situation. The information includes commercial satellite images, but a lot of other intelligence about, for example, where certain types of Russian units are active.
All right.
And Rob Lee writes, some interesting nuggets in the article. Hard to overstate how important it has been that Ukraine has retained much of its air force and air defenses. But many people have been asking why so many Russian senior officers have been getting killed.
Yes, they have.
Many people. If we extrapolate, Ukrainian forces have used specific coordinates shared by the U.S. to direct fire on Russian positions, the article says. Well, that might have something to do with it.
Don't.
Right. So I'm a little worried about drawing too many strong conclusions from this war so far because there's a lot we don't know. I think the level of intelligence sharing by the U.S. that support Ukrainian targeting probably doesn't have a precedent in military history.
Probably not. I wouldn't publish that, but all right.
But at the same time, Russia has a habit of putting their generals on the front, or close to the front lines, because
it's their own fault.
They don't really have a working, functional, non-commissioned officer system, and they have to make sure that the generals are there relaying top-down commands, which makes them vulnerable.
Yeah.
To, for example, getting shelled.
All right. Yeah, that's
if somebody happened to tell you exactly where their headquarters was.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot happening in the
irresponsible
modern technology makes
not
possible.
To speculate, but it's just interesting stuff going on here. So again, I also see, just as Anthony Blinken and other people have said, and Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, had talked about the fact that they see their role as obviously helping Ukraine, but they want to see the Russian army weakened. And having said that, the coverage seems to be shifting along the lines of, Russia has some real issues here, we've suddenly discovered. Maybe they're not the big bad Russian army that everybody thought. So the papers of record are getting a little bit better now about covering the same stuff we've been covering by looking at the freelance experts, so to speak, that aren't in the paper of record, that are talking about the issues with Russians' army constituents. They don't have enough men. Their command and control is terrible. The Ukrainians are getting armed with the kind of arms they need. They're getting intelligence that, is helping them do what they do. They're very effective. They're smart. They're pulling back strategically, all this other stuff. So it's not, Russia's going to have an offensive in the Donbass. It obviously means they're going to win. No, that's not obvious at all, actually. And so a lot of the papers of record are Washington Post, New York Times in particular, cable news, they're all, getting on board with the idea that, our Defense Department is saying maybe the Russians won't win. So we can report that now that, maybe the Russians won't win.
All right. Well, I'm glad they were coming around to it.
Well, do some independent reporting. Talk to other people besides the Defense Department who are very cautious.
Yes. But if they won't, I guess it's worth trying to get the Defense Department to come around too. And for foreign policy reasons, they really should have earlier.
Well, for foreign policy reasons and for military reasons, it's really good to have the correct assessment of what's going on.
Yeah, that would help. Not that they always think it's in our best military interest to tell the truth once they find it out, but it would be nice if they knew it from the beginning. Somebody should know it.
Yeah, I mean, don't trust everything the Pentagon says. It's a pretty good rule of thumb. But at the same time, that's why I think all these independent experts are useful in putting together a picture when they're all saying the same thing. Something might be going on there. Yeah. Anyway, that's my roundup. I know it was all over the place, a little domestic, a little foreign, but,
Moldova.
This is a stream of consciousness, train of thought presentation, and I didn't do it on PowerPoint, so it must be legitimate.
There you go. That's what keeps.
And if it were PowerPoint, I promise you, I would simply using blue slides with white lettering because that's how you know that it's accurate.
That's official. Everybody.
Yeah, 1970s style, presentation there.
All right. Well, very good. I appreciate the roundup. We'll get another chance at it before the weekend tomorrow. More Moldovan updates, if possible. Well, it's important to know what we can about Moldova before it disappears, for one thing.
Right.
Okay. Well,
before they pack it back up in the box and they move some other country there.
Right. Sell it at the Moldova, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
And they've got. We learned yesterday they actually.
I saw Transnistria was up for sale on Etsy, so
I think Elon Musk should buy it. Might as well. Why not? Get a small country here and there, especially one that's going to be in the news. Very hot. People are into it. And,
I think he paid more for Twitter than he did for the budget of Alaska.
It's probably true. Yeah. Well, he's got.
Why didn't he just buy Alaska? Give it back to the Russians.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Read announcement, it says right here. So that's what I thought I would. I've been directed by Russian intelligence. Okay, let's see. Wide open for today. Where should we go with this? All right, so let's see. Madison Cawthorn has all of his problems mounting. That's true. I don't really think I need to read through the article about him getting caught with the gun the latest time. I think we all have a pretty good concept of that. Oh, this I should have discussed with Greg, but maybe I'll throw it out there and maybe tomorrow we can discuss it. But I did happen to see this over at the New York Times, and gosh, as I was saying, I think to Greg during the break, the Loudoun County numbers at the coronavirus tracker at the New York Times, emailed to me each day, and it's just kind of creeping up each day. The numbers, it's a slow advance, and it's usually an increase of 10% or less or each day's creep upward adds 10% or less to the 7-day average. The New York Times numbers are very complicated and sophisticated, I'm sure. But the numbers of raw cases just keep creeping upward and upward again, and we're into the mid-80s each day here in Loudoun County, and it'll be back in the 100 range soon if the trend continues, and that puts us back to I don't know, numbers that we were seeing, I guess, pre-Omicron, but when we were still, in the throes, right in the middle of the pandemic. It's not good where we're getting back to. And, this probably has something to do with it, or it's certainly related. This Times piece more than half of Americans have been infected with the coronavirus at least once, the CDC says. Now, that's a different story from the numbers that I see at Worldometers each day, which measures the number of positive tests, which is a totally different thing than the estimate for the number of people who have been infected with coronavirus, because apparently lots of people, A, get infected and never know it, B, get infected and deny it, or C, get infected, acknowledge it, but don't get tested and then therefore don't report it. But by the numbers at Worldometers, just open it up so I can get the current figures on it. Here, let's see, the U.S. number for total cases per million of population, that's easily converted into a percentage of the population that counts as a case. That is to say, got tested, came up positive, and reported it to the authorities for inclusion in the statistics. It is a rate of 247,486 per million, which translates roughly, well, not roughly, exactly. All you really have to do is just move the comma over. That's 24.7% of the population has turned up as a positive case somewhere along the line. As countries go, we're no longer near the top of the list. It used to be that we were in the top 10 pretty regularly. Now the top 10 most infected countries are it's skewing towards the microstates again. And by the way, I think I keep thinking to mention this when I'm tweeting out the numbers nightly, but I never do because it should be pretty obvious. And I guess I was just waiting for one day when it's all island nations in the top 10 for daily reports as opposed to the cumulative reports. The cumulative report, top 10, most infected, that is most reports of infections in the world, are also dominated again by islands and other microstates. Islands tend to be microstates. The Faroe Islands being the top among them. And again, here it's, I think, largely because a tiny population, and with a diligent enough government, you can test everybody all the time and you never miss anything, and there won't be non-reporters. And of course, every time, a few people test positive in a microstate with a low population, in the case of the Faroe Islands, we're talking about under 50,000 people. And I don't think it's an independent country in its own right. I think it's territory of Denmark anyway. But so you have to be tricky in the language. You're talking about jurisdictions here. Different. Many of the top ranked jurisdictions aren't even microstates in their own right. They're not states. But when you're talking about a population of under 50,000 people, when a few people get, test positive and it's reported, the numbers jump. The Faroe Islands, because it's only got 50,000, it's the effect is exaggerated when you normalize the numbers and report the number of cases per million in population. Well, they don't have 1 million in population. They don't even have 500,000. They don't even have 1/10 of 500,000. But it translates to 704,431 people per million, or 70.4% of the population has actually been tested and reported as coming up positive at some point during the pandemic. And for the Faroe Islands, it's mostly late in the pandemic. So that's how it's going worldwide. Faroe Islands, number 2, Iceland. So the Arctic and Nordic islands, I guess, getting hit super hard. But it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the weather either, because a lot of the tropical islands are having just as much trouble. So the top 10, Faroe Islands, Iceland, Andorra, landlocked but microstate, Gibraltar, not a state but an island, Denmark, which launched itself in there when they decided, to hell with all these restrictions. We're just going to wing it and do the old Sweden routine. And then they rocketed up there because they did it right in the middle of Omicron, and then they've stayed there. So that's the top 5 there are jurisdictions where more than half, statistically speaking, more than 50% of the population have reported positive results or had recorded for them positive results. Close behind at 48.4% is Slovenia, much in the news these days, right? Or are we talking about, I can't distinguish anymore between the ones we have been talking about. Slovenia, Slovakia, there's another one, Serbia, I think of all the time when we throw in all the S states in Central Europe. San Marino, microstate, landlocked as well, but also at 4.75% of the population. The Netherlands, which started out getting hit hard, then dropped off the top 10 and then came back in Omicron. New entrant, or relatively new entrant into the top 10 are Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, which are, I think, Caribbean islands. And then at the moment, number 10, sneaking back into the top 10, is Austria, which we really haven't paid much attention to. Just edging out the other day, Liechtenstein, the microstate, and the microstate island nation of Saint Barth, or Bartholomew, right? So anyway, the tiny places doing terrible these days, and lots of islands. I mean, if you run down the list from there, Latvia, Israel, France, not an island, rather large, Estonia, Seychelles Islands, Channel Islands, obviously islands, Georgia, not an island, but Reunion, I don't know how they pronounce I guess French accent mark doesn't mean the same thing as it does in Spanish. Reunion Island at number 20. Beyond that, Switzerland, okay, Martinique, Lithuania, Cyprus, Montenegro, Portugal, Luxembourg, Caribbean Netherlands, number 28, Czechia, and number 30, Guadeloupe. You see, it's very island heavy, very microstate heavy. More islands in here as you run down from number 30. Well, 31 is Belgium, not an island. South Korea, Isle of Man, Slovakia, Cayman Islands, Aruba, Maldives, UK, they're islands, I guess. Greece, a lot of islands there. Brunei, none. Or wait, maybe it is an island. I don't know. Now that I think about it. Bahrain, Ireland, island, technically, right? I mean, it is. It's a large island. Monaco, Germany, Cook Islands. I'm trying to get to the United States here. You see what's happening? Croatia, Italy, Norway, St. Martin, French Guiana, Uruguay, French Polynesia, Curacao, Spain, USA. What I was trying to get to there wasn't, you'd get the flavor along the way for the number of islands and microstates. But the fact is, for all the complaints among conservatives trying to pin more blame for the continuance of the pandemic on Biden, he said he'd get rid of it. Well, Trump said he'd bring it down to zero. It was going to go 15 and then down to zero, and then 85 million people got it that we know of in the United States. But at the same time, the U.S. used to be in the top 10 or flirting nearby with the top 10 in terms of recorded positives. And then, of course, well, on the one hand, you could say, well, really, it's a factor of Republican-led states, Republican governors just refusing to report any more numbers. That's certainly partially responsible for the drop. But if you're going to say that the buck always stops with the president, well, okay. Then with Biden, we went from a top 10 down to an also ran in the 55 range in company with Palau, and then, by the way, Sweden following close on for all of that. Now that at least gives conservatives something to talk about, is that Sweden is not that much better off, and only slightly better off than us in terms of the rate of infections tested and reported vis-a-vis the U.S. on a normalized basis. But on the other hand, our deaths per million are above 3,000, whereas Swedish deaths per million are considerably lower. Not great among the all things considered, but 1,827 versus our 3,046 deaths per million. Trump really just destroyed our ability to deal with the virus, and we're still having that problem. Anyway, so back over to the New York Times. They report it this way. More than half of Americans have been infected with the coronavirus at least once, the CDC says. Reminder to everybody, no reminder necessary anymore. But remember that in early days we all thought, well, once you get it and you get over it, that at least you'll be immune, because that's the way we're used to thinking about viruses, and it's not true, and you can get it several times. Dang. 60% of Americans, they say, including 75% of children, had been infected with the coronavirus by February, federal health officials reported on Tuesday. Another remarkable milestone in a pandemic that continues to confound expectations. The highly contagious Omicron variant was responsible for much of the toll. It seems unusual, but I guess it certainly could be the case. Obviously, if you're asymptomatic, you never know you have it, and that, by all reports, is how Kamala Harris was experiencing it. I guess they just test her regularly, and it wasn't because she said, I don't feel well, give me a test. They were just testing at random because she's the vice president and they do these things, and found out, oh, hey, you've got it. Well, that's weird. I don't feel like I've got it at all. Well, all right. Well, we'll give you the Paxlovid, and she's taking that, and hopefully all is well, but she's isolating because that's the responsible thing to do, even if she's not suffering from any symptoms. But I guess once you get past that and you realize lots of people could have it and not know it, that's where you get to this idea of 60%. And how do they get to that number? I think they explain that a little bit later in the piece. But where do we leave off? The highly contagious Omicron variant was responsible for much of the toll. In December of 2021, as the variant began spreading, only half as many people had antibodies indicating prior infection, according to new research from the CDC. While the numbers came as a shock to many Americans, some scientists said they had expected the figures to be even higher, given the contagious variants that had marched through the nation over the past 2 years. So they were testing for the presence of antibodies in the blood and finding that many more people than the 24.7% who we've officially reported as being infected have in fact been infected. Now, there may be, good news in the data, some experts said, a gain in population-wide immunity, and we use that term guardedly, I guess. You have immunity, meaning you can still get it, but it's more likely, I guess you could say, that you will get it asymptomatically. You will experience it asymptomatically when you do get it, I suppose, if you have this immunity. But it can't really be said to be immunity if you become infected. All right. But the good news is that a gain in population-wide immunity may offer at least a partial bulwark against future waves. And the trend may explain why the surge that is now roaring through China and many countries in Europe has been muted in the United States. That's a good point. Maybe that's it. I still think you may see things change here in the United States. I don't know if we've done our 6 to 7 week lag yet and completed that time that to this point the pandemic has needed to jump the ocean and really catch on in the United States the way it did in Europe with the first couple of waves. Or the 6 weeks could be up and we're just not going to spike the same way. There might be a rise. It might even be a significant rise, but maybe it won't be spike shaped. We'll find out. All we can do is wait. A high percentage of previous infections may also mean that there are now fewer cases of life-threatening illness or death relative to infections. We will see less and less severe disease and more a shift toward clinically mild disease, said Florian Kramer, an immunologist at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. It will be more and more difficult for the virus to do serious damage, he added. Hope so. Administration officials, too, believe that the data augur a new phase of the pandemic in which infections may become common at times but cause less harm. At a news briefing on Tuesday, Dr. Ashish Jha, the White House's new COVID coordinator, said that stopping infections was not even a policy goal. The goal of our policy should be, obviously, minimize infections wherever possible, but make sure people don't get seriously ill. The average number of confirmed new cases a day in the United States, more than 49,000 as of Monday, according to the New York Times database, is comparable to levels last seen in late July, even as cases have risen over 50% over the past 2 weeks, a trend infectious disease experts have attributed to new Omicron subvariants. During the Omicron surge, infections rose most sharply among children and adolescents, according to the new research. Prior infections increased least among adults age 65 and older, who have the highest rates of vaccination and may be most likely to take precautions. Evidence of previous COVID-19 infections substantially increased among every age group. Dr. Christy Clark, the agency researcher who led the new study, said at a news briefing on Tuesday, widespread infection raises a troubling prospect, a potential increase in cases of long COVID. That's the problem. A poorly understood constellation of lingering symptoms. Up to 30% of people infected with the coronavirus may have persistent symptoms, including worrisome changes to the brain and heart. Vaccination is thought to lower the odds of long COVID, although it is unclear by how much. The long-term impacts on healthcare are not clear, but certainly worth taking very seriously, as a fraction of people will be struggling for a long time with the consequences, said Bill Hanage, Hanage, an epidemiologist at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Even a very small percentage of infected or vaccinated people who develop COVID would translate to millions nationwide. There are still tens of millions of Americans with no immunity to the virus, and they remain vulnerable to both the long and short-term consequences of infection, said Dr. Tom Inglesby, director of the Center for Health Security at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Betting that you are in the 60% is a big gamble, he said. For anyone who's not been vaccinated and boosted, I would take this new data as a direct message to get that done. A la Greg on the vaccine.
God, get the vaccine already, you fucks.
Pretty much. I would take this new data as a direct message, like that one, to get that done, or expect that the virus is likely to catch up with you if it hasn't already. So there you go. You should be vaxxed up and being careful, and probably still have a mask nearby and at the ready, or have a supply ready and waiting to go if you're gonna risk it walking around without a mask. Be prepared to go back to the mask, I guess, when you get it. All right. So, I don't know. I thought that was of some interest. I don't know, was it wise to use the time on that or not? But most of this audience is still pretty cautious and still pretty interested, I think, in these COVID issues. All right. Back to the politics. Big story from yesterday, more tapes from the New York Times writers who are making big bucks on their new book or whatever. By the way, I'm not certain that it's exactly the same situation with these guys as we've suspected with others, but I think it's at least partially the case that, yeah, they probably were withholding things that they knew from daily reportage for the publication of their book, but I'm not certain that the tapes are necessarily among them. We've got to get the provenance of the tapes, how long have they had them, et cetera, et cetera. They might be late breaking news. I'm not sure. And even if they're not, at this point, I give up already. What can I tell you? They're withholding the good stuff for books, and we're doomed. But at least we have this now. Hooray. I can't believe how much evidence there is of how conscious Republicans were of the damage they were doing at the time. Ha ha. Color me shocked. Well, anyway, the new developments lead to this piece in the New York Times. McCarthy feared GOP lawmakers put, quote, people in jeopardy after January 6th. That's interesting. On January 6th as well, they put people in jeopardy, but then later, new audio recordings reveal Kevin McCarthy worried that comments by his far-right colleagues could incite violence. He said he would try to rein in the lawmakers, but has instead defended them. So, similar calculus with far-right members of the Republican conference in the House as with Trump himself. gee whiz, I really need to call on him to resign. The impeachment could work. This is his fault. This is his doing. He needs to take responsibility for it. Oh, never mind. Same dance with ultra-right members of the House Republican Conference. I really should do something. I'll rein them in. They're going to hurt people. Oh, never mind. Alexander Burns and Jonathan Martin writing this piece, and I think it's because it's their book that is prompting all of this. Representative Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, feared in the aftermath of the January 6th attack that several far-right members of Congress would incite violence against other lawmakers, identifying several by name as security risks in private conversations with party leaders. I win the big prize here if Marjorie Taylor Greene is among them, because I told you before she was elected that she was setting herself up for doing just that harm to fellow members. A Q assassin with a member's PIN and floor access. I remind you every day. Mr. McCarthy talked to other congressional Republicans about wanting to rein in multiple hardliners who were deeply involved in Donald Trump's efforts to contest the 2020 election and undermine the peaceful transfer of power, according to an audio recording obtained by the New York Times. But McCarthy did not follow through on the sterner steps that some Republicans encouraged him to take, opting instead to seek a political accommodation with the most extreme members of the GOP in the interest of advancing his own career. Who could have guessed? Mr. McCarthy's remarks represent one of the starkest acknowledgments from a Republican leader that the party's rank-and-file lawmakers played a role in stoking violence on January 6th and posed a threat in the days after the Capitol attack. Audio recordings of the comments were obtained in reporting for a forthcoming book, This Will Not Pass, Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. And by withholding that reportage when you got a hold of it for a book, I think you increase the chances that it will pass. But okay. In the phone call with other Republican leaders on January 10th, Mr. McCarthy referred chiefly to two representatives, Matt Gaetz of Florida and Mo Brooks of Alabama, as endangering the security of other lawmakers and the Capitol complex. But he and his allies discussed several other representatives who made comments they saw as offensive or dangerous, including Lauren Boebert of Colorado and Barry Moore of Alabama. So, no mention of Marjorie just yet, but many of these people, Marjorie adjacent, of course. By the way, just to clear things up, I was saying I'm not 100% sure the provenance of the tapes and when they discovered them. And although they were discovered in the reporting for the book, I am not certain when they came to light. And, of course, that's an interesting spin to put on it, too. I noticed the way they put that. It was discovered as part of the research for the book. And so I suppose you could try to argue, well, because I turned it up in the research for the book, and not in my research for daily reporting, then somehow I'm less, less liable for any damage that comes from it. I was reporting it for a book. So as soon as the book came out, I reported my results as soon as they were ready for publication. I just never made them ready for publication in the daily newspaper because that wasn't what I was researching for when I came up with them. I don't know if you buy that as an excuse. Anyway, I guess it also will depend. I still don't know exactly when they came into possession of the tapes. Anyway, the country was, quote, too crazy, Mr. McCarthy said, for members to be talking and tweeting recklessly at such a volatile moment. Mr. Brooks and Mr. Gaetz were the prime offenders in the eyes of GOP leaders. Brooks addressed the January 6th rally on the National Mall, which preceded the riot, including using incendiary language. After January 6th, Gaetz went on television to attack multiple Republicans who had criticized Trump, including Liz Cheney of Wyoming, a member of the leadership team at that point, right? Those comments by Gaetz alarmed McCarthy and his colleagues in leadership, particularly the reference to Ms. Cheney, who was already the target of threats and public abuse from Trump's faction in the party because of her criticism of the defeated president. He's putting people in jeopardy, McCarthy said of Gaetz, and he doesn't need to be doing this. We saw what people would do in the Capitol, and these people came prepared with rope, wink, wink, and everything else. Representative Steve Scalise, who's already survived one assassination attempt, right? The number 2 House Republican suggested that Gaetz might be crossing a legal boundary It's potentially illegal what he's doing, Mr. Scalise said. Well, I can't trust a Republican on what's legal and what's not, but it's an interesting thought. On Tuesday night, Gaetz responded with a blistering statement castigating the two House Republican leaders as weak men. While I was protecting President Trump from impeachment, they were protecting Liz Cheney from criticism, except they really didn't, and they did end up booting her from her leadership position. And, of course, Scalise and McCarthy both provided as much protection in terms of votes and on the floor for impeachment as Gaetz did. He didn't do any better than they did in that sense. McCarthy, referring to Brooks, said the Trump loyalist had behaved even worse on January 6th than Trump, who told the crowd assembled on the National Mall to fight like hell before his supporters stormed the Capitol in an attempt to disrupt the electoral vote count. Brooks told the rally that it was the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass. Ooh, ass. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. There's more. Yes, Mo Brooks said the word ass, and we have to deal with that. But McCarthy was particularly taken by those comments. He said on the tape here, you think the president deserves to be impeached for his comments? That's almost something that goes further than what the president said. Maybe, maybe not, but okay. You obviously changed your mind about whether or not the president deserved to be impeached. You voted no on it, and haven't seen you even try to do anything about disciplining Mo Brooks at this point, but that's the whole point of this article. All right. We'll read a little bit more. I don't know how long this goes on, but we'll see. When we get bored of it, we'll run away. Speaking about rank-and-file lawmakers to his fellow leaders, McCarthy was sharply critical and suggested he was going to tell them to stop their inflammatory conduct, but he doesn't. Our members have got to start paying attention to what they say, too, and you can't put up with that, he said, adding an expletive. Ooh, I wonder which one it was. Mr. McCarthy and Scalise did not respond to a request for comment. Brooks on Tuesday dismissed the Republican leader's criticism and noted that a lawsuit brought against him by a Democratic member of Congress for his January 6th speech had been dismissed in court. So Kevin McCarthy spoke before knowing the facts. Well, he spoke back in early January, so come on. Brooks said, adding that he did not recall Mr. McCarthy ever speaking with him directly about his speech. That's because he changed his mind. So Brooks not really understanding what's going on here. But what did go on, of course, is that he says he's going to tell him to stop, and then instead he says, I'm not actually going to say anything. So where were we here? Okay, right. During the January 10th phone call, that's when the tape was made, McCarthy was speaking with a small group of Republican leaders, including Scalise, Cheney, and Representative Tom Emmer of Minnesota, as well as a number of aides. It was on this GOP leadership call that McCarthy told his colleagues he would call Trump and tell him it would be my recommendation you should resign. We heard that the other day. The House Minority Leader has in recent days lied about and tried to downplay his comments. There you go, lied. That's nice. Last week, after the Times reported the remarks, McCarthy called the report totally false and wrong. After McCarthy's denial, a source who had confidentially shared a recording of the call with the book's authors agreed to let the Times publish parts of the audio. In the days since that recording has been made public, the Republican leader has repeated his denial amazingly, and emphasized that he never actually carried out his plan to urge Trump to quit. I guess he thinks that's exoneration for him. Well, I didn't actually do it. Well, yeah, that's actually the point, is that you're recorded saying you're going to do this brave thing to preserve American democracy when, in fact, you're really not. Because you're once again going to trade America's interests for your own, just as you did the first time you were caught on tape when it was all about you had just spoken to the Ukrainian prime minister who would come to tell you what danger the entire West faced, and of course Ukraine faced in particular, at the hands of the Russians, and you didn't understand what you were being told, and you made a dumb joke and derailed the whole conversation, and basically, everybody reached the conclusion that, look, the Russians are helping Trump win. Trump will help us cut taxes. He's a Republican. Let's just stay silent and see where this goes. And if it finally gets to the point where we as Republicans have to swear allegiance to Vladimir Putin, then at that point, we're going to step in and say, fine, let's do it. That's terrific. Put the cash in this account. That's where we ended up because, ironically, Matt Gaetz is right about McCarthy. He's a weak leader. He's not a leader at all. Anyway, where were we here? Right. So he thinks it's a good defense to say, well, I didn't actually urge Trump to quit or try to impeach him. I chickened out. So don't you see what a brave leader I am? McCarthy's comments casting other Republican lawmakers as a menace within Congress illustrate the difference between how he spoke about his own party right after January 6th and what he imagined to be strict confidence, and the way he has interacted with those lawmakers in the 15 months since then. On the January 10th call, McCarthy said he planned to speak with Mr. Gaetz and ask him not to attack other lawmakers by name. The following day, in a larger meeting for all House Republicans, McCarthy pleaded with lawmakers not to incite but rather to, quote, respect one another. Boo, respect. That's soft CRT stuff. You're fired. Well, anyway. In his determination to become Speaker of the House after the 2022 elections, McCarthy has spent much of the last year forging a closer political partnership with the far right, showing little public concern that his most extreme colleagues could instigate bloodshed with their overheated or hateful rhetoric. Bloodshed or speakership? Bloodshed or speakership? Can't we have both? In recent months, McCarthy has opposed punishing Republican members of Congress who have been accused of inciting violence, including Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, and most recently, Paul Gosar of Arizona, who posted an animated video on social media that depicted him killing Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, the left-wing Democrat. So it's okay. In the case of Mr. Gosar, McCarthy told reporters he spoke with him about the video and noted that Gosar had issued a statement disavowing violence. But McCarthy opposed a resolution to censure Gosar and remove him from his committee assignments. McCarthy also ignored a remark by Brooks last year when, after a man was arrested in connection with a bomb threat to the Capitol, the Alabama Republican said he understood citizens' anger directed at dictatorial socialisms and its threat to liberty, freedom, and the very fabric of American society. Yet, immediately after January 6th, McCarthy saw a clear link between the comments of some lawmakers and the potential for future violence. On January 10th, he urged his fellow GOP leaders to keep a close eye on members like Brooks and Gaetz and ask them to alert him if they saw any potentially dangerous public communications. McCarthy said it was particularly unacceptable for lawmakers to attack other lawmakers with whom they disagreed about the outcome of the 2020 election. That stuff's got to stop. Or, hear me out, what if it increased and got worse? Wouldn't that be good for us? Not at the time, he didn't think so. Probably not even now, but he is trying to surf the wave. The country is too crazy, McCarthy said. I do not want to look back and think we caused something, like Scalise getting shot over here or whatever, or we missed something and someone got hurt, like Scalise getting shot. I don't want to play politics with any of that, unless I do. On the leadership call, McCarthy, Scalise, and others discussed several other lawmakers who had made provocative comments around January 6th, including Mr. Moore and Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas, who's been outdumbed by far in the last year. You hardly ever hear about him being the dumbest member of Congress anymore. Ms. Cheney, who was on the call, suggested Boebert was a security risk. Yes, pointing out that she had publicly tweeted about the sensitive movements of other lawmakers during the January 6th evacuation. She's runner-up in my guesses for Q assassin, and in many ways probably made a better bet than Marjorie Trader Greene, but I consider them of a piece, and whichever one of them snaps and starts shooting first, it hardly matters. McCarthy also inquired about Ms. Greene and whether she had addressed the January 6th rally. Moore, like Brooks, a far-right Alabama conservative, tweeted on the weekend after January 6th about the fatal shooting of a rioter, Ashley Babbitt, by a member of the Capitol Police Force, noting that it was a black police officer who shot the white female veteran, and added, "You know, that doesn't fit the narrative." Immediately after that comment was read aloud on the call, McCarthy expressed a wish that the big social media companies would ban some members of the Republican conference as they had done with Trump after the insurrection. Can't they take away their Twitter accounts too? McCarthy asked, and that may end up being what dooms him more than anything else. Ms. Boebert, Mr. Gohmert, and Ms. Greene did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Moore declined to comment directly on McCarthy's remarks, but in a statement he predicted that the Republicans would become more united than ever after taking back the House this November, whatever that means. Much like his handling of Trump, McCarthy quickly lost his will to confront the far right, including the lawmakers most directly involved in spurring the January 6th riot. His handling of Mr. Brooks was a case in point. On that January 10th call, Scalise told McCarthy that there was talk among some Republicans of punishing Brooks by stripping him of his committee assignments. McCarthy did not respond to the idea directly, but inquired what committees Brooks had seats on. A push to punish Brooks came from within the Republican Steering Committee, an influential organizing panel that hands out committee seats to members of the party. One member of the committee, Representative Steve Womack, a retired National Guard colonel from Arkansas, was horrified by Mr. Brooks, by his conduct, and led the charge to punish him. At the first session of the steering committee after January 6th, Womack played tape of Brooks's speech for his colleagues, including McCarthy. "I saw jaws drop," said Womack, a sober-minded conservative, usually loyal to the party leadership, in an interview for the book. By Womack's account, McCarthy asked to postpone dealing with Brooks until the next meeting of the steering committee, but when the body convened again later in January, McCarthy had already lost his appetite for taking on Brooks. Womack quit the steering committee in protest, warning McCarthy and his colleagues that Republicans would come to regret their refusal to take action. "I cannot tell you how angry I was," Womack said. He sent a resignation letter to McCarthy, but received no response. McCarthy's handling of the episode, Womack said, demonstrated a lack of leadership. That's putting it lightly. That's a good story. Buried at the end there. By the way, I guess while we're on the subject of steering committees, I thought I might throw this note in here. I noticed that Tegan Goddard tweeted this out yesterday as part of his report in his Political Wire publication, that Evan McMullin, who's running for Senate in Utah for Mike Lee's seat, to see if we can boot him out, but he's going to run as an independent. And I think over the weekend, the Utah Democratic Party officially adopted the position, opting not to field a Democratic candidate for Senate. And I guess in that sense, I don't think they went as far as to endorse him, but maybe they did. But basically the upshot of it being, let Evan McMullin have a one-on-one shot against Mike Lee, and maybe you unseat Mike Lee. And though McMullin is conservative, he was agreeing not to run as a Republican. And now he says he pledges not to caucus with either party. According to the Salt Lake Tribune, the quote here, Evan McMullin's U.S. Senate campaign spokesperson on Monday reiterated that if he were to become elected the independent candidate vying for incumbent Mike Lee's seat, this is poorly worded, he would not Evan McMullin, if he were to become elected, I guess I would say, the independent candidate vying for incumbent Mike Lee's seat would not caucus with the Republican or Democratic parties, the Salt Lake Tribune reports. And, well, that's campaign trail rhetoric. I mean, he might mean it, but just a reminder about, how things work. I was asking about this when I saw, so who does he intend to ask for committee assignments? Because people who caucus with Democrats get their committee assignments from the Democrats. They put you on the list and nominate you on the floor. Vice versa, Republicans see their own steering committee and make their requests. And Republicans make their nominations and Democrats theirs, and then they vote on the floor. And, remember how the process works. And don't forget it, too, because some of these mechanics will become important again, especially if Republicans do take over the House and the radicalized faction of Republicans are really running the show. They may insist as payback for Marjorie Taylor Greene being stripped of her committee seats that certain Democrats not be allowed committee seats. So it might become the case that the, generally pro forma acceptance by each party of the other party's determination of who they want where is simply rubber stamped. That might not go through. I don't know how it'll be in the Senate. But at any rate, the point here for Evan McMullin is somebody has to agree to put your name on their lists. And if you're not going to caucus with either party, what would be the incentive for either party to just say, well, out of courtesy to you, you're not doing any courtesies for us, but out of courtesy to you, we'll give up some of our slots on the committees and give them to you. And I mean, you might find Democrats actually doing that, and that'll make everybody say, oh my God, spineless bastards again. But it might be understood at that point that, well, I can't caucus with you for political reasons back home, given that I ran as an independent. But wink, wink, I'm with you on these important votes. And if you could do me the favor of putting me on a committee here, I know it's an imposition, but you'll find me more loyal that way, which is, of course, caucusing with a party and breaking the pledge. But the only way to live up to the pledge is to say, I won't serve on any committees, which is to say, I'm going to voluntarily put myself in Marjorie Taylor Greene's position and be totally powerless within the body. And by next time around, if the Republicans do take back the majority in the House, you'll find that Evan McMullin has less influence on the legislative process than Marjorie Taylor Greene does. Although the fact that he's doing it from the Senate, I guess it comes out in the wash, since he theoretically could, leverage things by filibustering, but with no caucus or conference behind him, it'll be a difficult uphill climb. I think he may find himself outvoted quite a lot. It'd be extraordinarily difficult to lead and maintain a filibuster, even a silent filibuster, without the backing of one or another of the political parties, even if they happen to agree on substance. Okay, so that's something to consider if you're in Utah. It's just a bad answer and shows that he's giving a political answer. Maybe it's a good campaign answer, and that's all, but it's not a very practical answer and doesn't display any understanding of the body that he seeks to join, but he may know that, and he's just, like I said, giving a campaign answer. All right, let's see. Why not finish up the day with a couple of other interesting tidbits? Out in Michigan, some weird place, speaking of the caucuses and political parties there, hadn't followed this news until... Well, I still haven't really followed it, but I don't know anything about it, except for the fact that I just saw this morning that Republican State Representative Matt Maddock has been removed from the State House Republican caucus there in Michigan, and I'd like to know why. And it's important because, well, any member that gets removed is kind of important, but more than just being a rank-and-file Republican, which I guess he is now. Maybe he holds some sort of minor leadership position, but apparently he was said to be a leading candidate for becoming Speaker of the Michigan House next time around, and apparently had gained the endorsement of Trump for that position. And in addition, his wife is statewide Republican chair in Michigan. So potentially a very influential Republican, booted from the Republican, what do they say? Caucus. I don't know whether they really call it the caucus, but the headline says caucus. Here's the story. Michigan State Representative Matt Maddock, an ally of former President Donald Trump, and the husband of Michigan GOP co-chair Michon, how does she say Michon Maddock, was removed from the House Republican caucus Tuesday. She looks a little, from this angle of this photo of her here, a little Marjorie Trader Greenish, actually. Anyway, Gideon DeSandro, a spokesperson for the state House Speaker Jason Wentworth, the current House Speaker, confirmed Maddock was kicked out of the caucus in a text message. The confirmation was a text. Now, he wasn't kicked out by text, I don't think. Anyway, he did not provide an explanation, writing that the caucus doesn't discuss internal issues. So let's see what we can find out here. This is the Detroit Free Press doing the reporting here. Clara Hendrickson is the writer, by way of crediting the work here. Maddock didn't respond to a voice message seeking comment. Caucuses typically include all members of a party elected and serving. It is rare, but not unprecedented, for a member to be excluded. The websites for the Michigan House of Representatives and the Michigan House Republicans no longer list Maddock as a member of the GOP caucus. By the way, I did have another piece that was not as thorough as the Detroit Free Press piece, but did have a piece of information that I'm going to switch over so I can provide it to you. It was Channel 3 News here, WMT from Michigan, reporting also that this was a rare thing, but I guess not that rare. I mean, they go ahead and they say, you know, it's relatively rare, but the decision to remove a member from the caucus, rare, but last time it happened was 2019. So, gosh, that doesn't feel all that rare, but it's not every day, but it's not that infrequent either. That was Grand Traverse County Republican Larry Inman, removed after being charged with bribery, extortion, and lying to an FBI agent. And then in 2015, Republican Representative Cindy Gamrat of Plainwell was removed from the House Republican caucus after being accused of breaching caucus confidentiality rules by posting on Facebook about legislation. But I guess some secret about legislation, because you're supposed to be able to post about legislation, but whatever. An accusation Gamrat denied at the time. So, like I said, not a great deal of extra information in that piece. So I'm going to jump back to the Free Press piece instead. Maddock was first elected to the state house in 2018, re-elected in 2020 to represent an Oakland County district that includes, for those of you there in Michigan, Highland, Milford, Springfield, Waterford, and White Lake townships. He's currently seeking a third term and had been vying to serve as the state house's next speaker, which sometimes in the state legislature, 3 terms might, seem like a lot more. Wouldn't really fly typically in the United States House of Representatives. They like them a little more experience. You got to give out a little bit more money, but we'll see. Might have been a long shot, but I guess because he thought he had Trump's endorsement, who knows whether he still does. He thought he had a better shot. Anyway, he and Michon, whatever his wife's name is, Maddock, have strong ties with Trump. We'll see how strong. The pair have peddled misinformation about the 2020 presidential election. If that's what got him booted, that's interesting. Both were among a group of Republicans falsely claiming that they were the state's presidential electors. Some real consequences maybe. Maybe not, though. And tried to enter the state capitol the day Michigan's Electoral College votes were cast for President Joe Biden. Michon Maddock signed a fake certificate of electors. That's why her name is familiar to me. Signed a fake certificate of electors to try to award the state's votes to Trump. The two also spoke at a rally on the eve of the deadly January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Really? Matt Maddock's PAC, Maddock Leadership Fund, lists contributions to several Trump-endorsed state house candidates who have built their campaigns based on, you'll never believe it, false claims that the 2020 election was rife with widespread fraud. So I don't know if they're not saying outright that that's what's causing them to eject him from the caucus, but it's a very interesting development that someone will keep an eye on and then write an article and we'll read it later on, perhaps. All right, let's see. A few minutes left here. What makes sense to try to share with you at this point? Let's see. There are definitely a few things here. I got to scroll down a little bit. Maybe some interesting opinion pieces that were shared in the last couple days that might be of some interest. You know what? Why don't we do this one, which I don't have to scroll down for. An opinion piece in CNN by former federal judge J. Michael Ludwig, whose name comes up from time to time on the show. I know Greg has brought him up, and it's largely, he gets quoted a lot because he's one of the outspoken, like really actually quite conservative Republicans who's actually open and honest about how bad the January 6th situation really was and how bad things still are in the Republican plot to steal the next election. Here's his opinion on it. The Republican blueprint to steal the 2024 election. I mean, I don't know whether, I haven't read it yet. I don't know whether it reveals any more pieces of the puzzle, but just having somebody who is, one, an arch conservative, and two, a former federal judge, although, not a current federal judge, won't have a chance to rule on this, but, you assume he's speaking from a solid legal footing here, especially if he's a former federal judge. He's no longer, on the hook for providing, doing day work for the Republican Party, but from the bench. Nearly a year and a half later, he begins, surprisingly few understand what January 6th was all about. I think we all do, but it's nice to hear him say it. Fewer still understand why former President Donald Trump and Republicans persist in their disproven claim, that the 2020 presidential election was stolen. Much less why they are obsessed about making the 2024 race a referendum on the stolen election of 2020, which even they know was not stolen. We learned that, of course. Well, we knew that originally, but we also got reinforcement from the texts from Jason Miller and others, for instance. January 6th was never about a stolen election or even about actual voting fraud. It was always and only about an election that Trump lost fair and square under legislatively promulgated election rules in a handful of swing states that he and other Republicans contend were unlawfully changed by state election officials and state courts to expand the right and opportunity to vote, largely in response to the COVID pandemic. So this is interesting in that he is coming straight out and saying, attacking the theory that Republicans were using to invalidate the election results by saying, no, the Constitution demands that the state legislatures make these changes, not state boards of election, etc. And Ludwig is saying, well, no, legally the duties, I guess he'll say, were delegated by acts of the legislature to the state boards of election, etc. And that counts. That takes care of business, and there's no basis for this claim. But we'll see whether he fleshes that out. The Republicans' mystifying claim to this day that Trump did or would have received more votes than Joe Biden in 2020 were it not for actual voting fraud is but the shiny object that Republicans have tauntingly and disingenuously dangled before the American public for almost a year and a half now to distract attention from their far more ambitious objective. That objective is not somehow to rescind the 2020 election, as they would have us believe. That's constitutionally impossible. Trump's and the Republicans' far more ambitious objective is to execute successfully in 2024 the very same plan they failed in executing in 2020, and to overturn the 2024 election if Trump or his anointed successor loses again in the next quadrennial contest. The last presidential election was a dry run for the next. From long before Election Day 2020, Trump and Republicans planned to overturn the presidential election by exploiting the electors and elections clauses of the Constitution, the Electoral College, the Electoral Count Act of 1877, and the 12th Amendment. If Trump lost the popular and Electoral College vote, which he did, the cornerstone of the plan was to have the Supreme Court embrace the little-known independent state legislature doctrine, which is fake, which in turn would pave the way for exploitation of the Electoral College process and the Electoral Count Act, and finally for Vice President Mike Pence to reject enough swing state electoral votes to overturn the election using Pence's ceremonial power under the 12th Amendment. We know all about that. The independent state legislature doctrine says, of course, that under the elections and electors clauses of the Constitution, state legislatures possess plenary and exclusive power over the conduct for federal presidential elections and the selection of state presidential electors. Not even a state Supreme Court, let alone other state elections officials, can alter the legislatively written election rules or interfere with the appointment of state electors by the legislature under this theory, which is a ridiculous one. And we're a little bit late on our music here, but I'm running a little long on this one. The Supreme Court has never decided whether to embrace this stupid doctrine. I add the stupid, but then Chief Justice William Rehnquist and Justices Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas, in separate concurring opinions, said they would embrace that doctrine in Bush v. Gore 20 years earlier. And Republicans have had every reason to believe that there were at least 5 votes on the Supreme Court for the doctrine in November of 2020, with Amy Coney Barrett having just been confirmed in the 11th hour before the election. Trump and the Republicans began executing this first stage of their plan months before November 3rd by challenging as violative of the independent state legislature doctrine rules relating to early and late voting, extensions of voting days and times, mail-in ballots, etc., in various swing states. These cases eventually wound their way to the Supreme Court in the fall of 2020, and by December, the Supreme Court had decided all of these cases, but only by orders, either disallowing federal court intervention to change an election rule that had been promulgated by a state legislature, allowing legislatively promulgated rules to be changed by state officials and state courts, or deadlocking 4-4 because Justice Barrett wasn't sworn in until after all those cases were briefed and ready for decision by the court. In none of these cases did the Supreme Court decide the all-important independent state legislature doctrine. So I guess it's still hanging out there.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, of course, I should have guessed that I wasn't going to make it all the way through this thing. I should have scrolled to see how long it is. But now you've got a taste for it. I may return to it, but it might be something you want to read in the time between now and our triumphant return tomorrow. But first, triumphant before us, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Next.